It is November. The year is flying by, unless you're one of those who is sitting at home waiting for a paycheck with the federal government. This is Heidi Hatch with KUTV 2 News. Mara Carabello in the house from the Ixoro Group, and a new fun guest we have today, South Jordan Mayor Don Ramsey. Thank you, both of you, for being here today.
Nice to be here. I'm going to start out. Can I start out with gratuitous hype that the mayor didn't ask for?
I can't wait.
So I feel like we're probably going to talk about municipal elections.
Yes, there was a little of that going on.
We don't just have somebody here. We have someone who got 82. I'm rounding down. I think it was 82.25. Maybe 2.6. Let's say 2.6. 82% of her voters in South Jordan voted for Mayor Ramsey. That's amazing and deserved.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know you didn't ask for the hype to start. I would have had music.
Wow, you guys are
I know
so
there's a lot of mayoral races that are not decided, so there's still a lot of stress right now. How are you feeling post-election?
There is a lot of stress out there right now, but I think, there was another drop last night of results, and so it looks like it's getting a little more sure, and things are spreading out a little bit, and I think we're getting more answers about how people are landing and what these results look like. So
yeah, and that's interesting to watch because there's so many races. When you have municipal elections, it's hard to focus where, what's most important and understand each community. So hopefully both of you can help a little bit on that. I was disappointed every municipal election. I'm thinking, okay, the voter turnout's going to be higher, but right now it's going to look like it's at about 30%. That's rounding up. Piute County, high five to you at 63%. And I noticed as I looked at the counties, most of our rural counties have a really high turnout, and they care, they're invested. Salt Lake County, where you think, oh, there's all these big issues. No, 23%,
no,
lowest. We don't care. Yeah.
We're lame.
Which is sad to see. Yeah.
It is, because, it makes what mayors and councils really do make a bigger impact. It just shows how headliney we are about everything. Like, we care about federal politics because it's in front of us every day, not because it impacts us the most, right? Whether that's quality of life, your neighborhoods, what they look like, and the more we lose local papers, the more important it is that we are really paying attention to the people that we elect at a local level.
Yeah.
I could not agree more. The old mantra, and I call it an old mantra because it's not what you hear anymore, that all politics are local.
Yeah.
Today, I think all politics are federal.
Yeah.
And I think we see people's concerns or their outlook on what they think is happening in the country or around the world, their concerns, and the only ability they have to impact change about the things they're concerned about is a vote like this. Mm-hmm. And it really is a little backwards, because this year's election was a lot more impactful on people's day-to-day lives than last year's. A lot of people don't realize that because, as you said, it is in your face all day, every day. We're aware of what's going on. But there were a few anomalies. Sandy City, I think, had above 50%. They had a high turnout.
Yeah.
But across the board, it's pretty low. It has been traditionally low, and it was pretty low. So there's not a lot of people choosing to step up and make their vote heard. I think in Charleston, the current outcome, the mayor election, it was tied, and now I think they might be one vote apart or something. So that's really close. So to anyone who says my vote doesn't count, that is not true.
Well, and with a low voter turnout, your vote counts even more. You're one of just a few. If you're wonking out the numbers that we don't have yet, we certify, I think, on the 18th. But what you don't have yet is a new change in the law in which it's not a postmark, it was a in hand. And so that's slightly different. It's sort of really wonky. But what we look for when we look at results is when people voted. Did it change people's voting behavior? Because that's really important to indicate how well our laws, in my mind, are serving the public. And if we see a lot of folks that had their ballots not counted because of the walk-in, I think we need to ask our legislature to really think about, from my point of view, the easier it is to have a secure election. We care about election security, but the easier it is, the more convenient it is. But we did have a slight law change that this municipality is the first election testing it out, and it was when and how we could mail in or walk in our ballots.
Yeah. The one thing that I thought was interesting, too, is the Utah County races have been extremely tight. We've been watching the Orem races, the Provo races, and Utah County seems to be an outlier from other counties in how they vote. I think they were slow to adapt and adopt to the mail-in ballot. And they've remained that way. And their elections director was saying that, that we got 50,000 ballots on election day. They like to wait till the last day. They like to drop them off in person. And so that matters with them getting, manually going through them and counting them. So right now, last time I checked the numbers, Dave Young, the mayor of Orem, is slightly behind. He's losing, and Karen McCandless is ahead at 51%. The Provo city mayor's race has been very close as well, but it looks like Marcia Judkins has won this race with Mayor Michelle Kafusi last night, posting a concession on her Facebook page. So right now we're looking at a lot of these races happen. Mara, how often do races like this turn over hands? Because a lot of times when you look at congressional races, once you're in the office, it's really, really hard to beat an incumbent. It seems like that's not the case in mayoral races.
So the Orem race had some rough moments. So it got a little scrappy.
Like the dark money stuff?
Yeah, it got a little scrappy. They had a lot of sort of pointed negativity online. So that starts to matter, particularly when you're talking about friends and family and neighbors, and it feels really personal. And it gets, when local races get rough, they get rough, because they get so personal.
Yeah.
So I think that was an impact a little bit in what the outcome of the mayor's race in Orem. The Provo mayor is interesting. The incumbent was very high profile, but as Dawn will tell us, one thing I have observed that's different about local elections is it takes an unusual mayor that can head into a third term, that can there's this bump right after the second term that makes it harder and harder. Also, Marcia Judkins had been an elected official, so they had voted for her before. She was a name. She knew how to campaign. So while she wasn't an incumbent to the mayor's race, you were seeing a seasoned person in campaigns running against an incumbent who had also been seasoned, and their margins were really small. I mean, they look like they're growing a little, but it's going to still be under 2 points, I think.
Yeah. Was it surprising to you? Because you're obviously running your own mayoral race to see how quickly things can change for a mayor that thinks that things are going well?
It's been interesting to see some of the upsets that have taken place. We had a lot of folks that were reelected, but we had some open seats. We've got quite a few new mayors elected there. But as far as the turnover, St. George is another example.
Yeah.
Mayor Randall has been serving there, and Jimmy Hughes just won that race. And it's been interesting to see. Actually, in Washington County, 4 out of the 5 largest cities in Washington County have new mayors. In Utah County,
that's a lot.
It is a lot. And we've got Lehigh and Eagle Mountain and Saratoga Springs. It looks like maybe Orem, Provo, new mayors. Several in the Wasatch County, the Weber County area, and all of the cities in Tooele County getting new mayors.
So I would tell you, I'll make an assertion as a pundit, but you would be more qualified to answer this as a mayor. So part of what I look at, particularly Washington County, South Valley, Salt Lake County, some parts, like we have a new city in Ogden Valley. But one of the things I suspect is some of these communities in between elections are changing quite a bit, meaning a couple of big subdivisions, and you might have an entirely new group of voters that move in that have not necessarily, maybe they just moved over a couple of neighborhoods, but a lot of times those new growth cities like the suburbs, if you will, of St. George are busting loose.
Yeah.
I mean, St. George is crazy.
That's actually something we've experienced in South Jordan as we continue to grow so fast. We have a lot of new people that have moved in the last 4 years, less than 4 years. And, if you get people who are new to an area, they maybe don't know the history. They don't know any of the challenges or successes that have happened beforehand. They just know it's a nice community and they want to live there, no matter where that is. It does play in. I think it does play in. And I think as we continue to grow and evolve as communities and as growth continues to happen in Utah, I think part of this outcome could be growth related.
Yeah.
I do think there's a sentiment that people have pretty strong feelings about growth, and I think that played into some of this too.
How much does that play in? Because depending on the community, I think some people have been frustrated their mayor hasn't allowed as much growth, or maybe they haven't allowed housing in the way they wanted, or the opposite where they're like, this is too fast, too much, let's slow it down. Is that what you hear from your constituents, or what's the major concern in South Jordan right now?
I appreciate that just about 83% of the residents of South Jordan used their vote to indicate that the way we're growing, they're okay with. They're okay with how we're doing it, because we didn't set out with a goal of becoming one of the 10 fastest growing cities in America. That's not something we aspire to. It's our reality, and it has been for quite some time. So I think there are communities that are new to the growth scene, and you might get a development for just 100 new homes that is life-changing, game-changing for people who live there, they think. And we get a lot of folks who maybe are still learning how to manage growth. We also have a lot of communities. I have the advantage of having a very sophisticated professional staff, and we've got a lot of good people working to help make sure that we lead and manage the way we grow. We have so many communities that don't have the luxury of having professional staff, and you get these part-time council members that are trying to man every job in the city and cover all of that. And so adapting to growth changes, either keeping up or leading out, or it's difficult, it's challenging. And I think some of those communities, some of them want to grow a little more, some of them do not want to grow more, and it's a tough spot for them to be in. And I think some of the voters expressed how they feel about that.
Yeah, I was talking to Holly Richardson, who lives in Pleasant Grove. She was telling me how the Pleasant Grove mayor's race was shaping up from her point of view, and she felt like one of the hottest issues was between I-15 and State Street, which is largely industrial. I mean, they're putting in housing now. And she felt like that was what they were arguing over, where the two versions of growth that were going to happen there. And something Dawn said reminded me of, and you'll know this stat, but working with the leagues and cities and towns, there's like 275-ish townships, cities. And it was something like 60% have staffs of under 5. I mean, like, you forget to that where professional services are really strapped, and how cities who are suddenly growing for the first time in their history and they're just keeping up almost with the city hall infrastructure. I think that's some of what happens in these fast growing areas.
Yeah.
If I may put in a plug for that, a couple of years ago, we were successful, meaning cities, Utah League of Cities and Towns, in having the legislature fund a local advisory member for each of the associations of governments around the state, with the goal of providing some professional expertise, planning. There's a lot of policies. So as we talk about these growth issues, we can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but if a community is literally not equipped, they do not have the expertise to be able to carry something out, then the policy almost doesn't matter because they can't execute it. And the funding, unfortunately, went away for that last year. And I'm going to put in a plug that we need that funding back, because...
Does it come from the state legislature, or where does that funding come from?
Yes, it came from the legislature, and it was
and it wasn't that much
last year. It's
like, we're not talking about a huge appropriation line item, and being able to we've used this as a public policy shop. We've used being able to help cities by using a professional planner to do what is ironically often state mandated planning, but that it's an unfunded mandate to cities. So them providing regional services. And that's the conversation which I found out that, like, I can't remember any examples, but cities that I was like, this is a big old city. And the mayor was like, yeah, I got a staff of 4. And I'm like, oh my gosh, bless you. There's no way you can get that. They're working like bonkers. So yeah, the state pulling and putting more demands on the cities, but not funding the professional staff. Also, the reason the funding was so great is sometimes you need super high level but relatively short-term consultants, because often the consultant isn't making the policy decision, but they are backfilling the engineering, so to speak. So it's great because then you still get your policy from a local elected official, but they have access to consultants who are too expensive for small cities to hire.
Interesting. Question for you. So when you go to these meetings where you get to meet with other municipal leaders, there's obviously a lot of changeover. Is it important to have mayors like you or others who've been around for a while to help the new ones as they come up? Because I'm guessing there's a pretty big learning curve when you're elected to office as well.
I think that's true. I've seen that time and time again, that being the case. And now here I am, kind of like one of the OGs all of a sudden. I haven't been here that long, and now we have a lot of turnover this year. But yeah, I do think it's going to be important that those of us who have done this before spend quite a bit of time with some of the new folks and try to understand what platforms they ran on, what their vision is for their community, what they want to go about, and maybe do quite a bit of educating about what the landscape is here in Utah, what it looks like, and things legislature's working on, things that the League of Cities and Towns are working on. One thing I'm very proud of that we do here in Utah is we do work together. I think the League of Cities and Towns and our legislature work better together than anywhere else in the country. It's important. And, maybe help some of these mayors also with communication. Part of being able to help people understand what's happening is communicating it. And if they don't have anyone to help with that, if they're not sure how to go about that, that might play into some of these elections too. So yes, I think it's going to be important that we spend time working together. And we've got a really great thing here in Utah, that we have so many good people who have served and a lot of good people who stepped up to serve. It's an interesting time to be an elected official, and I appreciate the good folks I've had the chance to serve with and look forward to meeting a lot of these new people.
Wendy, we're not naming names. You're so nice and professional. I feel guilty.
I know. Who do we want to throw under our bus?
This is who I'm going to throw, because I'm like, come on, this is take two. So how quickly, without naming any names, how quickly do you know the person that just got elected is a dope and is never going to get it? Because there are sometimes people, I'm not saying they're not, bless their heart, good people, but there are people that you're just like, dude's never going to get it.
There have already been some interesting campaigns
that
have taken place.
Right, you're two meetings in, and then you're like, oh, bless your heart.
But I'm hoping that people like that we can bring along. I'm hoping we can provide additional education and a broader context.
Okay.
One thing I think it's important that everyone in Utah needs to remember is that we don't live in silos. Our communities aren't silos, and we can't block off what's happening anywhere else and just stay the same. As much as change is fearful for a lot of people, growth, not just in numbers, but in sophistication and opportunities, continues to happen in Utah. And I'll be really interested to see what this looks like going forward. The election was just a couple of days ago. Several of these new people I don't know yet, only through watching what's happened with campaigns.
And on the flip side, when you talk about borders there too, last night we were just looking at where something happened, a crime, and it was very close from one city to another. And it's not like a street in between your cities stops the crime or stops the problem. So whatever cities you're next to, you're all kind of a group, you're working together, and one city's problems can also be your problems as well. Mara, quick question about this. You're an elected woman, so you can answer in just a second. But we talk about a lot in Utah that there aren't enough women running for office. And I think oftentimes we look, whether it's to the governor's office or we look at these congressional races and we say, the legislature, there's just not enough women running. But the opposite seems to be true when you look at these municipal elections where we have a lot of women leading.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
So you're right. Nationally, we're below average. And in the Intermountain West, we're getting spanked. These other Intermountain West states are doing a lot better than us. But that is almost exclusively statewide or legislative. And we do really well with local electeds. And when I've done training with women running for office, a couple of things happen. And women are more conscientious and aware, meaning they often need permission to run. Somebody needs to say, you should do it. And inevitably they'll say, oh, I should get more experience. Oh, I should know more. Where contrarily, the man is like, I've never done it before, but I'm sure I'll be the best. I'm pretty sure I'll crush this. And so some of it is, we have a really good, we're probably on generation 2 or 3 of legacy mayors and council women who are saying to others, you can do this. That one-on-one recruitment really matters. And I do think we have a pretty cohesive community. So I'm going to attribute the excellent work we've done in having women represent at a local level, being that I think there are legacy folks who have already been elected who are saying, come on board, bring me along. And once they break that barrier, passing that down through the generations, to be honest, I don't think we have that yet at higher levels. Also, if I'm building and being a little still critiquing of our culture, is that it's often part-time or perceived as more local and gentle and in cooperation with your family values and
so
your
you're
family
like the room mom of the
activities.
city?
So there sometimes is a little more cultural permission to what is perceived as part-time. And the reason I say perceived as part-time is no elected official is part-time, but it has this side gig sometimes pitch to it where others are full-time and you're leaving other systems. So I think that there is some cultural nodding that makes these feel more accessible to more women.
Would you agree, or was it a different mindset when you decided to run?
Oh, I agree. I actually completely agree with what you just said. And I think when I was elected, though, there weren't as many.
We were abysmal in every category
There
when you
weren't
were
as many.
elected.
When I was elected, there just weren't as many. But I think that was the start of seeing so many. And over the last 8 years, the elections that we've had, I think we've seen an explosion of women leaders come on the scene at the local level. And, you know, they do good work. These are smart women, and they do good work. They care about their community, and they're not passive, and you can't run them over, and they're really good at what they do. And I think our communities have been made better, you know, by their service. But I agree with you. At the local level, it's more acceptable, to the point that there were a lot of us that were the first woman ever elected in our city when we were elected, and that was not very long ago. And so I love that we're making progress that way, because I always say we need good women and good men at the table if we're going to make the right policy decisions, and we've been askew. But I agree with you. There's still some room to grow, I think, at other levels.
So I know the mayor's been involved. We should give, if anyone's interested. So Utah Women Run and WLI, which is the Women's Leadership Institute, both do great programs if you want to think about doing something. Like, it's not that you have to be running, but I think organizations like that who have been around for about the same time, 10 or 15 years, I think that that's also been helpful, that women can come and learn a little bit about what it means to run for something. I think those programs have helped.
So if you're sitting on the bench and you're listening to this podcast and you want to get involved, how do you do that? Is there someplace online, or how do you sign up to come be a part of those?
Yeah, Utah Women Run, you can just join of your own accord. WLI, I think you have to be accepted into a cohort, but it's all online. It's easy peasy.
Okay, so there's no initiation or like...
There's a hazing, of
Okay,
course.
good.
Yeah, we can't speak of it because, you know.
Because you know how those things work. Well, I want to switch to a couple of other local races before we move on. Local races are supposed to be nonpartisan, but Democrats in Utah are celebrating a switch in the Cottonwood Heights mayorship. Mike Weichers, who served as mayor of Cottonwood Heights since 2022, losing now to Galen Bennion, 57 to 42%. Are there issues that you've heard about in the city here where you see this change, or is this probably much ado about nothing? Any thoughts?
It's an interesting race because they both ran on very clear, particularly fiscal points of view and how they wanted to govern and what they were doing with taxpayer dollars. So I do think this was largely nonpartisan, although Galen had been elected as a Democrat. So that had to factor in, right? Because you knew you were voting for a Democrat. But it is a nod to those who are stridently, I don't want to call them fiscal conservatives, but if you are stridently right of center and thinking that a rigid tax basis and a rigid finance conversation instead of a what do my people want and need and what do they want to invest in it. I think if your fiscal philosophy is sort of on paper and doesn't have to do with the wants and needs of your residents, I don't think you're in touch. I think if it's a byproduct of math and not a byproduct of need. I'm gonna use South Jordan as an example. Their they're aware of their finances, but they have also invested in lifestyle, to invest in amenities, in a tax base and diversification. They have, I say as a Salt Laker, in a place of love, they've taken tons of entertainment and services that Salt Lake didn't keep their eye on the ball on. So building out a regional infrastructure where now I'm driving to South Jordan to take in a ball game, that sort of stuff has an element of fiscal conservatism, but also investment. And I think what you saw here is someone who I felt like had a sort of orthodox and rigor to financing that didn't keep in mind maybe what their citizens wanted.
Yeah.
If I can just give a little nod to that conservatism, I want to make sure it's clear that part of the reason that the growth that we're experiencing in our diversification of our economy in South Jordan, part of the reason that still is fiscally conservative is because the ballpark was privately funded. We didn't use taxpayer dollars for that. That was completely privately funded. And the professional pickleball that's coming to South Jordan, the big professional pickleball building.
This is new to me. Where is this coming?
Oh, it's coming to the east side of our city, just off of I-15. Did you know Utah has a professional pickleball team?
I did not, but I believe
not.
it at this point. I mean, there's a lot of people who've jumped in head first, so...
The Utah Black Diamonds is our professional team. There's a national league, professional pickleball league, famous athletes that we have all heard of and that our kids have all kind of worshipped own professional pickleball teams. Anyway, yeah, there's going to be.
Do we have someone famous that owns ours?
Fantastic. I don't know that they're famous. Okay. Yeah, I don't know that they're famous,
but
they're very, very involved, and they love it. Anyway, yeah, the new home of the Utah Black Diamonds will be built in South Jordan, and that's also, it's a $25 million project, also privately funded. So, I mean, I just think that goes to kind of what you were saying. You really have to get deep into what your community needs are, what the desires are, how you can strengthen your local economy, and be very aware of that. And you know, we're all working with lean budgets. We're all doing the very best we can. But I do think that conversation is something that played out in several races.
Yeah. I want to talk about those lean budgets because Salt Lake County and Davis County are both talking about fairly solid increases. And people, I think sometimes you pay your check to the county and you don't realize that there's a portion that come from schools, from your city, from your county. How hard is it to make sure that you're not, as a city, having to say, we're doing the same thing as the county, doing a 20% bump increase? Well, you're giving people the services they need, but also living within your means, because it seems like with inflation, it's not an easy thing to do right now.
Budgets are tight. They are tight. I don't know of any local government, whether it's a city, a community, if it's a county, I don't know of any that have extra money. Nobody does. It's tight. And you know, I talked to Commissioner Stevenson in Davis County, and I said, give me the lowdown about what that looks like. Explain that to me.
The
because
30%?
That surprised me.
Oof.
And I said, help me better understand where that's coming from. And, you know, he gave me some good insights. He said, you know, when you list that you're going to propose a tax increase, you have to list the number you think it could be. We never intended to go to 30%, he said, but we had to put kind of the highest threshold out there. He said they've got it down now below 15%, and he's really hoping they can get it below 10%. But one thing that's interesting that I hadn't given adequate thought to is that the federal government over the last few years has been helping out. They've been giving out some money, and it's helped to subsidize budgets and keep counties and communities afloat so they didn't have to raise taxes. That money's coming to an end, and there's been an inflationary issue for the last number of years. Costs keep going up, and I think that's what they found themselves up against in Davis County.
I'm going to answer sort of like, I'm going to be a political consultant.
Please
maybe
do.
A little bit when I answer this. So one is the inflationary index is still enormously unexpected and hard to predict. If you look over, I haven't seen indexing like this in my career. So the last 3 or 4 years, even if you took a conservative approach to if your municipal, your fixtures, your lights, your accelerated deferred maintenance, all that stuff, it's shot past what your budget line item was, even if you were a fiscal conservative. So when you hear local governments and big government saying, geez Louise, we thought we had enough, and the cost of doing business has gone up. So that's true. But the consultant in me is still going to bust the chops of Salt Lake County and Davis County and all these other guys, because here's what they know. Most political failures are failures to communicate, as the mayor said. But you know, by design, my tax notice, my property tax notice comes out this time of year. And it's by design, and also for whatever reason, we hate property tax more than any other tax. That, although I would say that's sometimes a dumb thing, but we hate property tax. And without explanation, to just do 30%, it's just such bad communication. Like, I'm like, okay, you might be earnest, but are you kidding me? It looks like you're mismanaging. And if I'm busting on Salt Lake County, someone should have strategized that the same time that the federal government shut down, then you're going to tell me you're going to raise my taxes by 20%. And then you thought it was a good idea at the next county council meeting to shut down some daycare centers. And then you were like, oh, we didn't go far enough. Maybe at the next meeting we'll shut down some senior citizen centers. I'm like, okay, you guys are not managing your public communications. And part of the relationship as taxation is trust. It's not that they begrudge that they're going to spend X of their paycheck on the collective service. It's, do I trust that the person is acting in my interest? Do they know what they're doing? Are they setting their sights on my priorities? And trust is a byproduct of communications, not of reality, actually. I mean, it's not reality. None of us spend that kind of time actually knowing what the city budget looks like. But we know whether we trust people. And when institutions don't communicate really well, like the Salt Lake County Council, which has not been communicating with us very well, it may very well be a really good idea to shut down all these centers and to increase taxes by 20%. They've done a horrible job so far talking to us about it, and our trust has been eroded. So when they come back to us and tell us all the reasons, I'm like, I don't know, I think you're a yahoo. So now you have to build back my trust before I'll even listen to your rationale.
I feel a little bit like a Kohl's shopper when I was listening to the Davis County stuff. I don't like Kohl's because I like to know how much things cost, but some people like to get a bargain. And so if you go to stores like that, the price is very high, but there's always a sale, and sometimes it's 40, 50, 60, 70% off. So I feel like Davis County gave you the 30%, and they're like, guys, but it's only 15% now. It's on sale. And you're like,
good luck for today.
Love it. Yes.
That
and
is
so
true.
that's what I felt like a little bit, but maybe that was part of the idea is if you pitch high when you tell them it's only 15, they're going to be like, okay, reasonable. Love it. Half off. I'll take it.
Now, I will say this, I'm going to shot across the bow to conservatives. I will say there's a conservative philosophy of not raising taxes. That's all well and good until you have a high growth city and a high inflation index, and it's not your fault, but things cost more. And I've seen some conservatives who are just like, well, I'm a conservative, I don't raise taxes. And I'm like, dude, your city has doubled, your needs have tripled, your da-da-da. It's not a bad tax. And when they defer that decision from ideological grounds, they do show up and say, okay, now I have to go up 20% because they didn't do it incrementally. And I think that that's more a predisposition of a conservative philosophy. And the thing you got to watch for with us tax and spenders is that we're pretty aggressive about the tax and spending. But I do think a bad byproduct of a conservative philosophy is if you're not keeping your house in order by acknowledging that things are costing more than they have, then you do hit me with what is a painful tax increase. And I think those are harder discussions.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about on that before we move on to anything else?
Just that there's been a lot of chatter around taxes in general, tax policy in general here in Utah. And it'll be interesting to see what comes up this next legislative session. I'm confident we'll probably see some different tax proposals than have been considered recently. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like for part of that reason, because a 20% tax increase, makes people's heads on fire. They're like, what? And so I do think that we'll see some proposals for how to address that. And really quick, back to your communication about just communicating about it. I want to give a little shout out to our communications team at South Jordan, because over the last few years, we have developed a system that we put out to people. It's a program called Taxes 101, and it's just information. It's Taxes 101. Do you know how your tax dollars are spent? And it's a whole thing that we've put together, and we put it out in our social media, and we're just trying to be informative. We're just trying to help people understand. I agree with you. There's no such thing as too much communication.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of good ideas, a lot of needs maybe don't happen because they're not communicated well.
And I think being well-educated citizens and knowing, because sometimes you don't know where to go and we're all so busy you don't know, but I think if you've got it on social media and as you're flicking through your TikToks or whatever else is on there, you can be like, oh, this is where my money goes to or where they pay. I think that's important to know. I know that a lot of people, when they got their property tax in Salt Lake County, were looking and they're like, oh, I didn't know this much money went to our libraries or this or that. So I think that communication is good. I wanted to talk about really quickly the Salt Lake City Council. I think there was a lot of talk about maybe some changeover. There were a lot of crowded races there. And it seems like status quo, that nothing much is going to change in the city so far.
Yeah, Victoria Petro's race was closer than I thought it would be. It was a new time incumbent to be, if we want to be inside baseball about it, it's a little bit of an interesting race for me because I know she's put out feelers to run for mayor in a couple of years. So that's an interesting thing for a council member to grapple with, just scrapping by. But she's going to win by several percentage points. And then I think with the one a lot of us were watching was the Chris Wharton race.
Yeah.
And he handled that it wasn't that hard. It was kind of cool though, if you really don't have anything to do. If you go on the election website, it's so interesting because we had Salt Lake City had ranked choice voting, which I think is if we could get a handle on the strategy, I think it's not bad for municipal elections, but you can see it by ranked choice. So you can see how those votes did or didn't matter. So if you really want to.
And I should note, if you were watching it, it looked like the voter turnout was higher than it was because the first round they accidentally put double the votes in. They fixed it fairly quickly. But yeah, at first you were like, woo, voter turnout.
Too. I was like, we're crushing it.
Yes, but there was no crushing going on.
Thanks for showing up, everyone.
Yes. Were you watching any of those Salt Lake City races?
Some. I was mostly that night. It was after the results had come out and I went back home that I got to start watching
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, and it's been interesting because I think there's been a lot of frustration when you talk to people about how things are being managed in the city, whether it's homelessness or other issues about some of the development in downtown. But it seems like those who voted were happy to keep things how they are. So we'll be interested to watch and see how that moves on in the days and weeks to come. I want to talk federal right now. We were talking how it trickles down into our local governments. But our shutdown is continuing into what is now the 6th official week. The FAA has now directed airlines to cut flights by 10% in 40 of the largest airports. That includes Salt Lake International. I think there was about 24, maybe 27 flights, mostly regional in Salt Lake, that were cut today. They felt like it was the lowest impact, but it's not low impact if it was your flight and you need to get to Phoenix or wherever close by you were going. And then we're also looking at the SNAP issues that are going on right now. So these federal issues are becoming local issues. Are you seeing that even in South Jordan? I think when you look at the averages across the state, South Jordan's probably one of the higher median incomes where there's probably not as many people needing SNAP, but every community there are people. So is this something that you're seeing a problem with as we're getting into week 6 of this shutdown?
Every community has people, whether they are, well, in addition to those receiving SNAP benefits, there's federal employees who are also now going, I still have bills to pay and a family to feed. And so there's a lot of people in all of our communities that are affected by this for sure. Yes, I serve on the Jordan Education Foundation. We had a meeting yesterday morning and we were talking about just the uptick in the need for the weekend packs and talking about how to go into Thanksgiving and help provide things that these kids need as an extra, right? Just to do what we can to make sure. We are seeing those needs, but can I just tell you how heartening it is for me? I love seeing the way communities are stepping up. I do think in Utah we are better equipped to handle challenges like this that we didn't see coming, but to take care of each other, take care of our own. We've had people who, during trick-or-treating, were giving out candy, and they had stacks of ramen noodles or cans of soup or something. And anyone who went trick-or-treating, if you need something to eat, take that too. We've got people working together to put together meal kits. We've got congregations doing food drives this weekend. So, yes, a lot of people are facing food insecurity that didn't expect to be necessarily, but I appreciate the way we're seeing people come together to say, these are our people. It doesn't matter if I don't know them personally or they're not one of my relatives or whatever. I appreciate that people are stepping up. We know that the legislature has allocated additional funding for the Utah Food Bank, and that is helpful. But I do think it's incumbent upon all of us to be very aware of the needs that are out there and to do whatever in our purview we can do to try to help.
Yeah, and we've seen Representative Oxier started a movement where you can go online and find out where the needs are. I think we have stepped up. I'm going to stick with a little bit of the critical politics here, the criticism here, in which the federal government is failing us right now. And we need to keep the pressure on those in our delegation, who I think are good people, but I have only heard John Curtis and really quickly Representative Blake Moore even say anything critical about it. It's their responsibility. It's not their fault, but it is their responsibility. And the other thing that frustrates me is often the federal government acts like it's their money to hand out. This is our taxpayer money that, frankly, we sent to them last year. So you are withholding funds that I told you I wanted to keep parks open, and I told you I valued SNAP. So you're messing around with my household dollars, and you don't have the right to do that. I don't think I want to lose my umbrage at the fact that the conversation has been political. No one wants to, equal opportunity bad, right? Republicans and Democrats, but they need to remember that they already took my money and now they're holding it hostage. And now we're in the longest shutdown ever. We're officially past the, okay, I knew I was a federal employee, so I squirreled away a little money. We're past that. And there are people who have been budgeting and who have been planning for this and who are responsible. There are people on SNAP who have full-time jobs and work really hard. These are not irresponsible people who need some supplemental help. There are people who work in the Park Service. Many of us have friends and family who, after this long, they're like, even though I have savings, I'm now making choices. I am drawing from accounts that weren't intended for me to pay my monthly bills, and it is because the federal government continues to fail to talk about anything but politics. But But one thing I will say is that the longer I've been in public policy, we tend to think that our elected officials have nothing to do with us, and they are a complete and total mirror. If we ask for cheap tricks, if we ask for negative campaigning, if we ask for tribalism, if we ask to be fear-based in where we act, if we try and treat each other that way, those are the elected officials that we will get. So if we are unhappy with our elected officials at a federal level, whether we like these people or not, we need to turn them over because we need to insist that they do policy.
Yeah, and a lot of that's missing, and whether you want to blame Republicans, Democrats, I think they all have some blame to go around right now. There are frustrations, and I know that there's some people saying, okay, we'll hold out, and maybe the federal government can downsize and get rid of people, but there are people making that choice right now. I heard some TSA workers that said they're at the point where they're like, I don't know how much longer this is going to last. I may need to quit this job and then go get a different job so I can actually pay the bills, and then when the government does start up again, you've lost these valuable federal workers that keep these operations running, and then you've got even more problems that lag for months down the road because you've got to hire new people for these jobs, which seems to be an issue. Do you see any stalemate breaking going on, or is this going to last through the holidays?
Yeah, at least this week we saw some of those coalitions that have existed since the beginning that are about bipartisan talking. They have indicated that those conversations are going on. And I think unfortunately, it's not the leadership right now, but it is the next layer. And I feel like there's some movement now, and I feel like there's some momentum.
Is it because the election's over?
I think it might be, but hey, so okay, we pegged it to a political moment. I think that the majority saw that the polling isn't playing out in their favor, and I do think that the Democrats will go with a less than their total if they feel like they can save face, which is the basis of every compromise. So I feel like there is movement. I'm actually pretty optimistic for this weekend into next week.
Same. I feel the same way. I've tried to stay in pretty close contact with several of our congressional delegation back in Washington here from Utah. They are frustrated. And I had a conversation with John Curtis yesterday. He's so frustrated over this. They want the government open. It needs to open. We all know it needs to open, right? But I agree that I'm optimistic. They are meeting today, right now. They are together right now. Yeah. They've been convened. They're on the floor. And, there's reports that they've said they'll stay all weekend to work it out, and that the House has said if the Senate can bring us something that they agree on and can approve, then we'll convene and take a look at it. I think the American people are speaking, and I think it matters less and less as time goes on what their demographic is, what that is. Everyone is going, this is ridiculous. We have to open the government.
When there's hungry people in your community, when you can't fly to get to your business appointments, you can't fly to get to your kids that need help or the holidays or whatever, when the frustration builds, I think both sides will probably have to pay for that. I want to talk about some of those federal races in just a minute, but really quickly here, switching gears to Utah's new congressional maps, there's still the fight that's going on in the courts. We're expecting a ruling from the judge on that by the 10th. So is that Monday? I don't even know what day that is.
That's Monday.
So we're expecting a ruling on that. Not sure exactly which way that will go, but as we're waiting for that, we're also hearing announcements of people who possibly might be running. Maura, any indication at this point what we're going to get from the judge, if it's going to be what the legislature put in or some of the others?
No, she's in a tough spot. I mean, and she's out of time. I mean, that we're up against real print deadlines. We're not up against political deadlines. We're at election basics in which they need time to prepare the security and the safety of the ballot. So we all have to know. And there's this whole trickle on with people making decisions. A while ago, we changed our filing deadlines to January. So we don't have there isn't any more discretionary time. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I will say that from my point of view that she has not been partisan about this. I don't think the judges actually have a partisan point of view. As it has always been, election law is by far the most open interpretation section of the law. And it is because when lawmakers are writing their own law, we're precise in some of our statutes. Election law, I can totally get why you would read these three statutes. They are somewhat not necessarily in concert with each other. And I can totally get why you would interpret that section differently than I would interpret that section. I think that's slightly a bit of byproduct in this. I mean, the legislature continues to sort of assert their constitutionality I would say, yeah, there's 2 sections of the Constitution, not one. But I think it's vaguely written, and so there's a lot of places for her to go that would have some justification from a judiciary point of view, but it'll be interesting to see what she comes up with. She's going to have a long weekend. I do not want her job.
Yep, agreed. And interesting is the only word I have for it. I mean, the deadline that the Lieutenant Governor's office needs it by is Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
The 11th.
Yeah.
So it has to be Monday. It has to happen
Yeah.
this weekend. And until then, we all wait to see how that goes down. And I think this is going to be a conversation that will probably go on for a long time, regardless of what it looks like Monday.
Oh, yeah. This is what'll be hard. It'll be over in terms of the steps that the Lieutenant Governor's office will start to take. It will not be a settled issue. And that will be more complicated.
Yeah.
And now we have
Republicans now
an
coming
initiative.
in. Yes.
So it is this is all layered on top of this big old mess.
Yeah, so we'll have a decision on Monday from the judge, but the Utah GOP is going forward with some meetings. They had some on, was it Monday of this week, and then Monday next week again on the same day, where they're talking about the signature gathering. They're still going to move forward with this, and that means it would end up on the same ballot. So 2026, it would be on the 2026 ballot after these new congressional races will go. So it may just be a really short decision that happens there. Are you hearing much from your signature gathering friends and what's happening? Are they paid? Are they hiring? Are they getting out the door already?
I don't know. They're going to have to pay. I know they were fundraising. I know fundraising around this is complicated because a lot of the Republican leaders were not in agreement with the efficacy of the party's effort. It was sort of so the Republican Party leadership, and I'm saying elected officials and party faithful, are a little in conflict about whether this is the right move, right? The goal is probably similar for everybody, but whether this is the path to reach that goal, from a strategic point of view, I am loving it because I am loving that the Republicans want to be pro-initiative, and I am loving that they want people to make the deciding factor because it cuts the knees out of their perpetual argument about, sort of the hypocrisy of this moment. I love from a party point of view, not because it's Republican, but because I'm pro-initiative. And so, but that's the bind that they're in, is how do you use that process to show that that process is not a legitimate process? Well, it's sort of, I guess, half a dozen back and 6, but it goes on the 26 cycle. They have a February deadline. That's when we know that they'll meet their mark. And then in 26, we have the question about the original, the 2018, which we're halfway through. The amount of laws that are colliding with each other at that point is.
Yeah. And South Jordan's one of those cities that might be changing which district they are depending on what map you're looking at. So that probably changes who you deal with when you've got problems and want help in Washington as well, I assume.
For sure, it does. And I think this whole process, I'm going to use the word convoluted. It kind of is, because if I put myself in the place of an everyday Utahn who doesn't get as in depth with all this, I've had several people say to me, "What is the deal?" What? Or they'll hear one sound bite and say, "This is unconstitutional," or "This determination should be made by the electeds or by the people," or whatever, without a lot of extra context to it. It's confusing for people, and people just, I think, want to know that they are going to be able to be well represented. It is a little sticky, I guess, for cities just to wait and see. We'll work well with whoever's wherever and whatever district we end up in, but there's a lot riding on this, and I think it gives people more angst than a lot of people realize. And I know there's lots of good folks going about different ways trying to come up with answers, and they're conflicting answers, but what it's doing is stressing out everyday people, and I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah. So we'll wait and see what happens next week. Meanwhile, other people who are thinking about running, Ben McAdams has filed the FTC paperwork. He filed for the 4th district, which I thought was interesting because you're kind of having to guess when you file your fundraising paperwork what district you might want to be running for, which may change depending on which map was suggested. So does that really matter when you file for a specific district? Do you have to refile again, or can you just stick a number in and switch?
I think it was a good strategic move for Ben to file before the judge ruled on the districts, because I think it wards off competition for him, and I just thought it was a smart move. We're weird in Utah in that we don't require our members to be, and we don't care. Like, we've had,
you don't have to live in the district.
There's 4 or 5 people. Now, most of them have been district adjacent, district friendly. It's not like they live 400 miles away. It's been like a 5-minute difference, so that's a little potato. But from a strategic point of view, I think it's interesting. Ben's got a complicated path on the Democratic side because if you are a diehard, hardcore Democrat, he betrayed you when he told you not to vote for Democrats and to vote for an independent. And that matters to him because those are the people that walk early. Those are the people that fill up an apparatus. So it's probably not a vote count problem, but it is an apparatus problem because those are the believers. And when you just told a believer that you want to do sort of the 6-dimensional checkers, they're like, no, I'm a believer. So he's got a little bit of a pathway there. But I think if you're a Democrat, he is by far the most appealing one in terms of name recognition and experience.
Are you going to see any of your mayoral friends who maybe didn't win their elections start looking at some of these congressional offices, or are you hearing of anyone else that is going to bubble up in the next couple of weeks saying they're running?
I have not heard of any of my colleagues that lost their elections this week that are saying, okay, great, now I'm going to go file
I'm
first
ready.
week of January.
Fire it up.
I mean, it's so fresh. It's been 3 days. Some of them are just getting their results last night and deciding. So truthfully, no, I have not heard that from them. But I do think there are people kind of in the wings waiting. I think there's a lot of people who would probably love to enter the race, but they don't actually know yet which district it would even be in or who they'd be running against. And that's unique because 6 months ago, they thought they knew who they'd be running against. So I'll be interested to see.
Yeah, our congressional leaders might be playing rock, paper, scissors with whatever map comes out, decide who's running in which district. Really quickly, before we wrap it up, I wanted to talk about the national elections. We had a few that we were watching. Democrats really swept the key races in New York, Virginia, New Jersey, and then in California with Prop 50 with their redistricting where they're hoping to get more Democratic seats. Mara, is this a good sign as the pendulum swings after Trump towards Democrats where things are going to be great going in the next year, or were these already kind of Democratic areas, what was expected, and business as usual?
Virginia was a good sign for Democrats or for anti-Trumpers. Because I think you could be a moderate mainstream Republican. Virginia was where you felt good. Northern Virginia was where you felt good. I think New Jersey was more expected. Down ballot on Virginia was very interesting. They elected, now let's just go back to a theme we hit earlier, tons of women and tons of first women's, tons of big city mayors, Detroit. You saw them down ballot. I like that because they're technical positions. Women haven't always dominated those positions. So I think it was expected. The one thing I will say, like from the pundits, the Democratic or left of center, pundits who are saying this was a direct repudiation of Donald Trump's agenda. I don't think it was, but here's what I do think it was. I think we need to continue. One of the things that Trump is brilliant at is persuading us all that he is the center of the universe. So whether you like him or hate him, we all think he's the center of all things. He's really talented at this. It's really a superpower. If we hate him, he takes up tons of headspace and we spend all of our time talking about he's destroying the world around us. And he's got this whole group of like true believers. It's his superpower. I think what this shows us, several different kinds of moderates, left of centers, progressives, and Democrats won. But I think what it told us is he doesn't have the Midas touch. He isn't calling the shots. You could be yourself and have an agenda. The ones who did really well actually ran really good campaigns. So I think our theme when we started, the local elected officials who run local campaigns with real issues and try and move as far as they can away, even though national politics, I mean, the mayoral race was all about national politics. It was crazy. But the ones who gave an alternative and who stayed the more local did better. So my takeaway was that it was somewhat about Trump, but it was that I am not necessarily going to let the executive government totally define who I am and what I'm doing, and those people who made that case did well.
Yeah. We saw a lot of young people, especially in New York City, turn out to vote that hadn't voted before, also women being important in these races. Do you think that will be something that keeps moving in this next election when you're watching what happens in your own city, your own county, your own state?
So I wasn't surprised at all by the outcomes of those elections because these are blue states. President Trump didn't win any of them. And I'm going to include California in that too with their Prop 50. I think the president did not win any of those states. They are blue states. And so to me, those outcomes were expected. Going to the younger voters, I saw a graph talking about the age of the voters, you know, in New York City. Maybe it was the same thing you saw.
Yeah.
And in thinking about that and the female voters, I think my takeaway is we need to make sure that we are paying close attention to the message. The message has been about affordability. It's been about how much cost of living is and how unattainable things are right now. Affordability was key in the New York City race. And I think it's going to continue to be key for young people, that voting bloc, that demographic across the country. I think that's something we would be very remiss if we didn't continue to take seriously here in Utah. We have to work harder and keep working harder to make sure that our young people can afford to live here. I think affordability was top of mind. They keep saying that in New York. It really has been. That, I think, is applicable everywhere and something we all need to work extra double time hard on to make sure.
Absolutely. Does that mean that in the obviously we're not going to have a presidential race for a few more years. We have a new president right now. He's been very focused overseas in peace deals and talks. Does he need to look at these elections and refocus on those things that we're talking about here around the dinner table of how much we can afford to eat or spend for rent or those kind of things to refocus?
I mean, I'm going to answer that politically. I mean, of course he yeah, I'm not a Trump fan. I don't like
What? Who are you,
I mean,
Mara?
my problem list with him. But what I will say is that for those who think they are running in 2028, this is what the mayor, I think, is saying. 2024 was about affordability. We called it inflation, but it was about affordability. And 2025 seems to be about affordability. And so do I think 2028 is going to be about he or she who is articulating best what used to be called table issues or household issues? For sure. And the question will be when and if the Republican Party, the National Republican Party, leaves Donald Trump, which is normal form. Normal form coming into the lame duck session, your midterm section, as a president who can't be reelected. That's usually when you kind of take a back seat to those who are moving into new elections. It'll be interesting to see if the Republican leaders do that with Trump or whether he still keeps calling the shots for the Republican National Party.
It'll be interesting to see. Anything you want people to be paying attention to before we let them go or what you're watching in the weeks and months to come?
My goodness. It'll be interesting really to see Monday what happens with these congressional districts and then to see who lines up to run depending on what those look like. You mentioned even our own current delegation might end up finding themselves wondering where they are and what that looks like. Really watching that closely. I've had some people lament, dismayed over the outcome in New York City. Mm-hmm. And, you know, my response to that I think is worth mentioning is that to me, it's evident that the values and the culture that we have here in Utah is not the same as what there is in New York City. Our priorities aren't the same. We don't embrace socialism here, and we have different values. So there are people actually afraid that could be what happens around the country now if a start of the biggest city in America is looking at changes like that. And you know what? I'm proud of who we are here in Utah. I'm proud of the way we do things. And even our Republicans and our Democrats work together better than just about anywhere in America. And I think we keep pressing forward. I do think that the future is bright, and I think there's a lot of reasons that Utah is the highest ranked state in America. I'm used to talking about cities. Is the highest ranked state in America, and I think it's because people on both sides of the aisle really will work together, and we try to get this right. So watch out for your neighbors. Take care of those that are going to be experiencing longer term challenges right now, it looks like, maybe because of the government shutdown, and let's just keep doing what we can do to lift Utah because it takes all of us, and it's the reason Utah's the best state in the country.
Yay, we all live here.
I'm going to end by saying something very nice about one of the reddest counties in the nation. So if you have not, and again, remember, I am stretched to go south of 21st South, but if you have not,
do it. I-80's the cutoff.
We're going to drag you out there.
So I do go to South Jordan, but if you have not visited the Ruth, which is in Pleasant Grove, Utah, it's amazing. So it's a new theater. It's part of the Hale family theater, but there's two kind of Hales, blah, blah. But this is the original Hale. It used to be that pink building in Orem. It has moved to Pleasant Grove. I think it's the doTERRA campus. Am I giving doTERRA? I think it's there. But if you have not been to the Ruth, I say to all my Salt Laker friends who also can't travel south, it's worth the drive. It's worth the drive down.
Which show did you
see?
see?
A play. Tonight, I'm going to see something that ends with Mrs. Harris in it. I can't remember. I hadn't heard of it before. I'm sure it's going to be lovely.
It'll be fun.
But this is my third play there. They have Charlie and the Chocolate Factory coming up for the holiday season. If you want a really nice new venue in Utah, Pleasant Grove, the Ruth Theater is just nice.
I haven't been down there for years. I'll have to check it out.
I hadn't either. It's great. If you love this Hale, which I know you go to this Hale,
yes,
just go a little further south to that Hale. You'll love it.
Okay. Yeah, my daughter who lives in California is flying home the week after all the holidays, New Year's. And I think bottom line, she's coming back to see Frozen at Hale Center Theater. And it's just a bonus that there's a free bed and breakfast with her mom and dad.
There you go. We'll
take her here to stay.
Take her one step further and have her go to, I think they have 2 or 3 more plays before their season
I'll
ends.
check it out. We can just do all the theater. Well, thank you very much for talking local politics. I know it matters. I think we all know it and feel it. Hopefully we'll show up the next municipal election to get maybe 32, 33% on average or something better. But thank you for being a part of the conversation. We'll be again back here next week. Tell your friends about us, and hopefully the federal government shutdown will be a distant memory by next Friday.